Sublette County, Wyoming is ground zero for natural gas drilling. Crossing the Utah-Wyoming border at I-80 and heading north, Sublette eventually expands into a nearly featureless palette of green and yellow, sagebrush and rolling hills in every direction. No buttes, peaks in the far distance, no towns. There are some 6,000 people in this county, which holds several of the nation's largest gas deposits, and not a single stoplight. Over a rise, the drilling rigs are this landscape's plainest feature. We're in the gas fields now. Every quarter of a mile, there's a set of tanks and a cluster of equipment.
The fact is, there will be development. It's just how we go about it rather than whether it'll happen or not. I mean, it will happen. That decision was made when the leases were issued.
There are roughly 6,000 gas wells in Sublette County, and more than that again planned. In one field, the Pinedale Anticline, 4,400 new wells were approved in September, despite a growing concern that the drilling was somehow contaminating the freshwater aquifer that underlies the region.
Development out here does have impacts, but between what BLM is doing, what our cooperating agencies are doing, we are moving forward with measures that are reducing those impacts that are occurring.
The BLM's impact study for the drilling found water with benzene and other toxic contaminants in 88 out of 220 water wells tested, but the rash of pollution has fixed scientists' suspicions on hydraulic fracturing. Scientists are increasingly worried that the chemicals used in fracturing may pose a threat either underground or when related waste fluids are handled and sometimes spilled on the surface.
We have no data showing one way or another whether there's a connection between frac fluids at this point in time and those contaminations, but we also have no reason to believe there is.
It would be very, very ignorant to say that hydraulic fracturing is not sooner or later going to affect water supplies and underground aquifers. It's going to happen even if they're very, very technically good at what they're doing. Nothing is perfect, and you can really cause a lot of damage to an aquifer if something goes wrong.
Whether fracturing and its components are actually the cause remains a mystery, in part because the gas industry enjoys exemptions from federal environmental law and the fracturing fluids are kept secret, protected as competitive trade information.
There should be oversight under the Safe Drinking Water Act for underground injection of hydraulic fracturing fluids. There should be disclosure of chemicals under the toxics release inventory. Dozens of other industries have to disclose what chemicals they're using, and the natural gas industry should do the same. The natural gas industry is also exempt from surface runoff standards under the Clean Water Act. They have waivers under the Clean Air Act. So what we'd like to do is see some fairness here. The natural gas industry should play by the same rules that other industries should play by.
Oil and gas drilling takes place in 32 states. It's a huge issue in the Rocky Mountain region, but it's an issue elsewhere, and it's a growing issue elsewhere because the boom that's come here is coming to other parts of the country. We've heard stories about water contamination in Ohio, in Arkansas, in Pennsylvania, in Texas, in Alabama. There's almost no state that's completely immune from this, and especially in the Northeast, in New York State and in Pennsylvania, there is a huge new boom that's coming there.
The energy industry maintains the processes are relatively safe, that hydraulic fracturing has never been proven to cause harm, and that the current laws are sufficient.
There's roughly 933,000 operating oil and natural gas wells in the United States right now. We've been drilling on the order of 30,000 a year over the past several years. So you're talking in the context of maybe 1,000 complaints that you've identified in some states in that broad context. That's really a situation where it's on a broad scale a very small number relative to the overall management of oil and natural gas production. These are complicated processes. They have to be maintained regularly. The cement casings that are put in place will deteriorate over time. The wells have to be worked over periodically, and that process requires a vigilance on the part of the operator. In some cases, even when that's done, the cement job may be flawed, and it may fail. But in the event that those failures occur, they're occurring in violation of the regulatory regime that's designed to maintain the integrity of the well. So there's a penalty associated with that failure.
For some in Wyoming, penalties haven't been enough. Jim Urbicite is a Sublette County rancher who used to work on the drill rigs.
I am not sure about the toxicity of this frac fluid, the polymers. I've been told it's real bad. If I were a parent with kids, I would absolutely not want to live downwind of any of these wells or disposal sites.
Urbicite says drilling is taking over the land and pushing out farmers. Congress will again consider this year to restore the Safe Drinking Water Act's authority over fracturing. If that happens, scientists at the EPA say they will finally have the authority to study the fracturing process and determine whether it can be done safely.
We really need new federal standards that set a minimum floor that says every state, everywhere in the country, these are the basic protections that everybody's entitled to if they have oil and gas drilling in their community. And then the states and the local governments can tailor that to what might be most appropriate for their areas. But we think that there's a role for new environmental protections that won't hamper overall production and won't be overly burdensome on the industry.
Across the country, the stakes are high. In Wyoming, some fear it may be too late.
I'm concerned that we will lose the things that we live in Western Wyoming for. This is a large, beautiful valley. We live here because of the natural values that are so abundant. And if we lose those, or if they're as severely impacted as they have been in the past 7-8 years, a lot of us will not find that this is a place worthy of calling home anymore.